Spoiled children. Can a child be spoiled? I personally / professionally think that's a myth. I do not believe children can be spoiled. I think spoiled has a negative connotation, and I think spoiled is a word used to mean or imply something other than what it is. I think traditionally or maybe culturally, people consider a child spoiled when they have their way or parents respond to them quickly or immediately. They tend to have their way. Some people use the term brat. Some people say spoiled brat. I think, again, it depends on where you're from and how that word is used. But one thing is for sure, it tends to always have a negative connotation. If nobody is proud to have a spoiled child. And a lot of times, these children are referred to as spoiled benefit from nepotism. And I personally am not against nepotism. If the parents are well off or the family is well off, then the kids will naturally benefit because the parents or family have the means and resources to do more for that child than, say, someone who is less fortunate than they are. And that's just a matter of upbringing and access. Outside of that, when it comes to children being spoiled and how that term is used, what usually is going on, I think it depends on the age range of those children. So what happens is when a child is young and say they cry a lot, and we're talking about infantry, a baby, let's say up to 1 to maybe 2 years old, because around 2, the average child does start talking or trying to communicate other than crying. But when a child is crying a lot in infantry, parents who respond quicker, pick them up, things like that. People say, stop spoiling that kid. Don't spoil that child. Also, in some cultures, you may hear the term coddling. You're coddling them. Stop picking them up so much. Again, spoiled tends to have a negative connotation, and you will hear some moms or families argue, they need me. I'm just responding to them. I don't want them crying too long. I think the whole misconception of what's going on if a child is spoiled or not is if we need to understand the developmental stages of children. So when we talk about a child being spoiled or getting their way, I think what people are intending to imply is that a child becoming entitled, that a child may not know how to self-soothe or be self-sufficient, and therefore they may grow up entitled, which does happen. Typically, when people use the word brat or spoiled brat, they are referring to a child who gets what they want even when they don't deserve it. They don't really know or understand consequences. But that's not always the case. Now, should your child be entitled? Should your child be entitled or children be entitled? No. I think children should understand discipline and consequences, right from wrong, knowing how to wait, knowing how to be patient. Those are all life skills that they need. But however, just because someone can tend to their child to a degree in which you agree with does not automatically make that child spoiled. So today I'm going to go over a little bit of research. We're going to talk about Erik Erickson and Piaget. You can look up these theorists on your own and do more research. Make sure it's an academic article that you're reading. I would prefer you not to use AI, but if that's your thing, that's your thing. But just make sure you're not reading someone's thoughts and opinions on these things, because these are the originators of what we're about to go over. Piaget has stages of development, and so does Erik Erickson, goes over stages of development for children. And I think it's important, and again, because there's no parenting handbook, I don't think a lot of parents know the stages of development. And so because we're all winging it when we're raising our children, hoping for the best, we don't actually understand, even as educators, what children should understand, should know, what they're supposed to be learning at each stage. You just assume. And then once your kids are smart and you feel like everybody thinks their kid is the smartest kid and they learn so quickly, and that could be true, right? And then our expectations for our children also increase. So if you have a 3-year-old who's able to keep up with her cousins or siblings who are older, then subconsciously we tend to treat that child older and raise their expectations, because they can do these things like a 6-year-old. They can do these things like a 5-year-old. We begin to treat them like they're 5 and set our expectations for them to do more, instead of understanding that they are just 3 or whatever their age actually is, and we should be treating them age appropriately. Our expectations should be age appropriately. You can raise the expectations to push them for further development, but you still need to be pacing them at an age appropriate pace based on their stages of development. So when it comes to spoiling children specifically, because I'm not really talking about what kids should learn academically, we can talk about that and intellectually another time or another video. You can let me know if you want a video on that. This I want to relate specifically, excuse my list, specifically to spoiling children and if a child can be spoiled and what children learn at each age, according to Erik Erickson. Because again, I don't think most parents know and understand this so that they can adjust their parenting, because a lot of us are just parenting the way we were parented and or however we were parented. And a lot of these ways in which we choose can be extremes. So these are some things to keep in mind as you choose. I will be using notes, so you will see me looking down so that I'm not making stuff up. Okay. So developmental stages from Erik Erickson. The first one is infant, and he believes the first stage, it's not called infant. The first stage is from infantry, 0 months to 18 months, from when the child is born, birth to 18 months, or as some people say, 1.5 years. I'm one of those people that I don't know why people count months after a year. I know there's a science to it. I'm going to say months and years because that's how you'll find it in the literature. But if you say your child is 72.5 months, you need to grow up. Anyways, so stage 1 is from birth to 18 months. This stage is called trust versus mistrust. And what they are supposed to learn is hope. And so Erik Erickson's theory is that children at each stage will either are going to fight between these two things to figure it out. And if they successfully learn what they need to learn at that stage, then they will have the balance or get the hope or the outcome of what I'm referring to. So between birth and 18 months, a child is learning trust versus mistrust. So this is the stage I was previously referring to, in which you will hear a lot of naysayers and people who won't mind their business say, stop spoiling that kid, or you're going to spoil them. Oh, if you do that, you're going to spoil them. As if anybody asks their opinion. If your child is learning trust versus mistrust, how you respond to them does matter, because during this stage, your child learns who will meet their needs and how their needs will get met. Again, children cannot talk. All they can do is cry, yell, poop, and sleep, right? So you don't have much feedback at that stage or age to know what your child is learning. Some of this you don't see until later in life, but these stages build upon each other, which is why they're important, and that's why I'm sharing them with you today. So again, birth to 18 months is trust versus mistrust. So you responding to your child's needs, not every cry, but your child's needs will help them learn trust versus mistrust. Who is coming to them? And this is how children get attached to people, whether it's the person at the daycare, one parent over the other, a sibling, whomever they prefer, because they've now built a bond based on trust. This person, every time I'm hungry, they're the first to feed me. If I'm in pain, they're the first to do it. They're the first to change my diaper. That's all they're learning, is who can they trust and what they can trust them for. And that's just based off of what they sense, because again, they can't talk and they don't have any understanding. They're not developmentally there. So when it comes to spoiling a child, you answering a child every time they cry is not necessarily spoiling them. What you have to be cognizant of is that if you're answering them every time they cry, if you're picking them up every time they cry, because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with responding, but should you hold them all day, every day to keep them from crying? My answer would be no. Not because you would spoil them, but because you will create codependency. And a lot of times, side note, a lot of people who do want to hold them, the child's crying or discomfort is making them uncomfortable, which is a trigger for them that you should see a therapist for. But you become codependent. You use the child to regulate your emotions. It makes you feel better. You feel needed. You feel wanted. The child needs you. You feel great that the child will only stop crying if you're holding them. It makes us feel all righteous and mighty. I'm a great parent. They love me so much. That's not what that means, to be honest. But that's how we take it. And we lie to ourselves all the time. And then your child also doesn't learn to self-soothe. And now your child needs you all the time because they don't learn independent play. They don't learn to do what they need to do to be okay. the child needs to know that you will come back later and they just need to wait. Now, here's a tricky thing about this stage. Because children can't use their words and really not their body either, I always wonder when, forgive me, most people, when their children are crying, the first thing they do, when babies are crying, the first thing they want to do is feed them. But I'm always wondering, like, what if the kid's foot is itching? What if they back is itching, right? Because I don't think they don't itch. We just don't know they're itching. Now, if they have dry skin that's visible, you might know that. But I'm just saying, what if every time you stick a bottle or a boob in the baby's mouth, they got an eyelash in their eye or something like that? I don't know. That's just the type of things I think about. Let's get back to the script. Stage 1, birth to 18 months, trust versus mistrust. You should respond to your children. You should tend to their needs. They need to know that somebody will be there for them, or who will be there for them, who they can rely on. Does that mean you need to hold them all day, every day? It does not. Does that mean they should always sleep with you? No, it does not. You can do what you want to do in your home with your children, but research does not say in order for them to trust you that you have to hold them every time they cry. That's all I'm saying. Stage 2, 1.5 years old or 18 months to 3 years old. And you can do the math on however many months that is. 1.5 to 3 years old is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And the goal is that your child will learn what they're willing to do, how to do things. So autonomy being, this is the stage in which your children start to gain control and they learn what they can and can't do. They're gaining independence. They're usually learning how to walk and talk. So they're learning how to say no and they're learning how to run away, right? And so they're coming into themselves at 1.5 to 3 years old. And this is why you should not always do everything the child wants to do, because at this stage, you will either reiterate or break the cycle of if your child thinks everything should go their way, because they're going to be very egotistical. Everything's already about them. Everything will probably make them cry if you say no, because again, autonomy is them finding agency over myself. This is my body. I can eat what I want to eat. And they also learn to poop. They're starting to potty train. And so they also learn control over, if I don't want to, I don't have to. And that's why some people have a hard time with potty training. And the other end of that is the shame and doubt. You may find that if a child disappoints you, they're more likely to cry or be sad or just chill for more emotional in general, because this is the time that those kids are learning that. So it's important, again, for you to have boundaries, rules, and consequences with your children, because at this stage, they're learning what is okay as they're coming to themselves and finding agency and autonomy versus what is not okay. But they're learning it through shame and doubt. So if you criticize or ridicule or over punish your child at this time, then this is probably around the time your child developed anxiety. If you have a child with bad anxiety, because of we're too heavy on the shame and doubt, and now the kids don't feel empowered to do anything. Again, tying this to being spoiled. If you do not employ consequences or boundaries, then the kids learn that they can do whatever they want all the time, and they're a terror to the world. Almost quite literally, they're hard to function. And this is, again, is the stage where I tell people, if it's not cute now, it won't be cute. If it won't be cute at 15, it's not cute now. So when your kids are fighting back, literally or figuratively, because they are finding their autonomy in their voice and they're able to say no, and you upset them and they hit you or lash out at you, it is very important for you to redirect or correct that behavior, because you may think, oh, I can't believe they hit me. Oh, I can't believe they cursed. Oh, they used the F word, and you're laughing and you're giggling. If you don't correct it then, they might do it in a few years when they're your size or bigger, and it will not be funny, so correct it. Stage 3, from 3 years old to 5 years old, is initiative versus guilt. That's exactly what it sounds like. At this stage, children are learning, I can do it. I can do this. Let me help, right? Those are the kids that are now this is what people consider the terrible threes. If you, maybe the terrible twos too. But at this point, children may, if you've done stage 1 and 2 with fidelity, at this stage, your child may be more helpful. They want to help you cook. They want to help you do the dishes. They want to help cut the grass. They want to help you build your Amazon and IKEA purchases. They may be more helpful, or they may be seeking praise. Mommy, I did this. Mommy, look what I can do. Or daddy. And otherwise, if it's not initiative, then they do feel guilty because it's like, oh man, they can feel if they let someone down. Again, that's based on the expectations from the previous stage. They now feel like, oh man, I should have did this or I shouldn't have done that, because they understand consequences now at this stage. But as you can see, if you have not started this from the beginning, the stage 1 of letting them cry sometimes, or letting them cry for a little while, or letting them cry themselves to sleep, then as they get older, they learn autonomy and they learn to speak up for themselves and they learn to do things. And then by now they understand consequences because you've kind of worked them into this. The next stage is ages 5 to 13. Depending on where you look it up, it can be 6 to 11, but roughly around that age. So pretty much around the time they start school, this will be kinder, first grade to maybe 7th grade, 6th grade, I'll say, is the cutoff, because that stage is different, and we'll get into that. This is industry versus infantry, and that is when children are learning competence. So at this point, you have kind of a big window of opportunity or time period in which kids are learning to just to comply. I think that's the easiest way. Kids are learning to follow rules. Think about it. When you put them in school, they're on a schedule. They have nap time. They have a time to eat snacks. They have a time. They do each subject, each activity, and usually that is mimicked at home. And so I think the word industry kind of is what it is, in that kids are learning how to move in the world, how to behave, how to respond. They just get this kind of window of opportunity, 5 or 6 years of pretty much practicing everything I hope you taught them from the first few stages. You will now see what that looks like as they go out. Do they get along well? Do they share? Do they play well with others? There's always other nuances that can impact these things, but I'm just speaking in general, going in order of these stages, according to Erik Erickson, that this is how the natural flow of things go when kids get older, developing. And so kids now should be figuring out how the world works, how to fit in, how to be obedient, I think is the best way, how to follow rules, and what happens if you don't follow the rules. The next stage can be, depending on the research, 12 to 18 or 13 to 21. I'd say 12 to 18 is a better range, just based on my experience with working with children in numerous settings. This stage is identity versus confusion. And the goal here is fidelity. And I think that is the perfect way to summarize that stage. Just think about you from that age group to now, and anybody you know. Around 12, 13, something happens. And if you have one, and there is research that says around age 14, for married couples or couples together, this is usually the hardest part, or when couples have the most issues or more likely to divorce, something like that. Don't quote me, Google it. But around 12, 13, so this is well into middle school. And when you work in a school setting, you see it at 7th grade, which is usually right at 13. Something happens. And it's not pretty. It's not beautiful. I always taught 6th grade, but I was a middle school counselor for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And 7th grade was always the age group. I said if I taught middle school, I would not teach 7th grade. I would teach 6th grade and I would teach 8th grade, but I would not teach 7th grade. Something happens at 13. Middle school in itself does something to kids. It's a big shift from elementary school with just responsibility and independence. If they have not done those other stages well, it will hit them hard and it will impact them significantly. But at 13, these kids struggle. And the way it manifests makes everybody's life difficult. They feel grown, but they're not grown. They think they know everything. They don't know anything because they're only 13, but they feel like they've lived long enough. But again, this stage is called identity versus confusion. And that's exactly what these kids are confused about who they are. At this age and stage, and again, this is between 12 and 18 or 13 to 21, people are figuring out, who am I? What do I like? This is usually the stage people pick their genre of music, and things like that. People's personality is really formed around now. How they prefer to dress, that evolves over time as people mature and develop as well. But kids really start figuring it out and kind of being their own man or woman or person at this time. And so, who am I is a very big part of it, but they also kind of resist other people tell them who they should be. So that's why it's more difficult on the parenting aspect. So again, when we refer back to spoiling children, if you've always let your kids have their way, this stage may not be as bad, except they may be somebody you never intended them to be because you didn't have consequences and boundaries before. So that can be very challenging for you. But also, it does not mean that if your child dresses what you consider weird or awkward or whatever is your fault, or they didn't do the other stages. I do think kids should have the freedom to express themselves within reason, as long as it's not hurting themselves or other people. But kids are really just figuring it out. They're playing around with, maybe they do want to dye their hair. Maybe they think they want another person. Maybe they want to wear clothes you've never seen them wear before. For a variety of reasons, of course. But mostly, they're just like, what do I like? Everybody's told me to do this. Everybody's told me to do that. Everybody says this. Religion says this. Culture says this. My parents say this. And they really may buck the system now because they are testing it. They're trying to see who they really are. Do they figure it out at 13? No. But this is the stage that they really focus on figuring out. And again, this goes into about 18 or 21. And just imagine, through high school, you change friend groups, and you're also trying to figure out who you are, what you like, who you like, what groups you fit into. You thought you liked these kind of people, or you thought these people liked you, and they didn't, or you didn't, and now you're confused, and now you're back to, you kind of keep going through this cycle all the way through the time you graduate. And even maybe when you go into college, you're like, okay, high school was either great and you figured it out, or high school might have sucked and you're like, I still don't like anybody, or maybe you like everybody, right? As far as relatability and friendships go. So that is quite a long stage, and that's why parenting is hard. All these stages are hard, honestly. But that's why, too, people say, when does it get easier? I don't think it gets harder, but the difficulty just changes at each stage. Once you figure something else out, it's on to the next. Once you figure it out, you graduate to the next stage. And then it's another stage. And it's all kind of the same level of difficulty that just looks different, because it's always something new to learn. And as I said in my last video, you kind of can learn a lot about yourself through this process if you are more in tune with how you're parenting and use your children as feedback to your parenting style. So up until early adulthood, you're going through identity versus confusion. The next stage is 18 to 21 till about 39, 40. So end of high school, basically, until you're about 40. You face the challenges of intimacy versus isolation. So I think if you're at this age, because I'm assuming the people watching this video are about that stage, that's when you're figuring out, do you want to be single? Do you want to be in love? Do you like relationships? What kind of relationships do you like? What do you like in these relationships? How do you relate to other people on a deeper level? Because at this stage, around age 25, your frontal lobe finishes developing, so you're able to make more concrete decisions, allegedly or seemingly, and then you're trying to figure out, how do you relate to people around you? Who do you want close to you? Who are your best friends? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to spend your time with? And what do you like to do when you're alone? And do you like being alone? How do you like to spend your time? How do you recharge? What does self-care look like? That is a time that a lot of my generation is in currently of, do I want to be married or not? Do I prefer being single or being married? Do I like being around people? Am I extrovert or introvert? Now everything, after all the hell you put your parents through, now you're on your own to figure it out, basically. And you're just like, now that I know how the world works, who do I want to be in this world? Who do I want to be with in this world? Who do I want to do this life with? And you kind of figure that out with that goal, that focus being love in that part of your life. You also explore a lot of your relationships with your family and parents at this time, your upbringing. You kind of figure all that out of what you've been taught versus what you're going to choose in this stage of your life. The next stage being ages 40 to 65. And this is generativity versus stagnation, and the goal being care. So at this stage, you're focused on giving back and figuring out what retirement looks like. Basically, how do you give back? Do you want to volunteer? How do you use your time? Now that you're wise, hopefully, all that you've learned, what are you going to do with it? Are you preparing for retirement? Do you want to go volunteer? Do you want to help children? Do you want to donate? Do you want to donate your time? And you kind of spread love and are more caring to society, because everything you used to care about, you don't. Now you have that autonomy to say, like, this is what I like to do. This is what I would spend my time doing, because that's the stage. And now you kind of in a stage of giving back, or you realize you're stuck. Like, maybe you didn't do all the things. Maybe you didn't get through all those other stages successfully or the way you wanted to. And now you are having what we consider a midlife crisis. Now you're 50-ish and you're just like, what is life? I've wasted time. I hate my job. My kids are grown if I've had them. I thought I wanted kids. And you don't know which way to go. You don't know if you should go back to school or not. You don't know if you should quit your job. You don't know if you should start your own business or not. You just kind of questioning everything and figuring it out for yourself, because you are at that stage in life where you've kind of done all the hard stuff, but life isn't over. So now what? The next one after that is ages 65 plus. And this is integrity versus despair. And this one's focus is wisdom. That at this point, if you've done all that you said you would do, you're the person you want to be in life, you have good character. Now you're just figuring out, like, either you're fulfilled probably or you're not. At this stage, it is very important of who you surround yourself and the life you live, because one, karma is going to catch up to you by now. So either you feel like you wasted life chasing money or chasing a relationship or a person who did not deserve you, and you feel bouts of despair because you're old and you feel like you're too old to recover, or you are grateful and you are satisfied and you retire well and you live a great life. And you kind of continue your legacy of the person you are and all you've built for yourself. And so Erik Erickson's theory is based on that. In each of these stages, you have to resolve this crisis for healthy development. The crises are, which I told you: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus infinity. I cannot talk. Sorry. Identity versus confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, integrity versus despair. Those are the crises. Those are the pivotal moments at each of those stages. And so, again, to tie this back to our original conversation about spoiling children, whatever you do when you're raising your kids, you need to make sure you're addressing the crisis at hand for the best outcome. Kids are supposed to learn, ideally, according to Erik Erickson. You can have your own beliefs. At each stage, what you should achieve is hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom. And that would be a well-rounded individual at the end of the day. Is this a perfect person? No. The goal will never be to have a perfect person. You will never be a perfect parent. You will never have a perfect child. You are going to disappoint them. They're going to disappoint you. And I just was talking about this from the lens of, can children be spoiled? I guess it depends on how you define spoiled. Can you do much to a child that it is not to their detriment? Yes. You can also do not enough to their detriment as well. Is there a true balance? No, because every child is different. Every child's needs are different. A sickly child will need you to tend to them more than a child who is not sickly. But I don't think spoiled in the sense of doing too much. Like, you can't love a child too much. I think if you don't have a healthy concept of what love is, and it's actually codependency, then that's a different conversation. But holding a child too much is not necessarily spoiling them. Unless you, when you say spoiled, you mean creating entitled, ungrateful little children, then yes, you are right. But I'm just saying the word is used loosely and does have a negative connotation. So nobody wants to say their child is spoiled, but people will say they're ungrateful. I just think we should be careful of the language we use. And honestly, we shouldn't talk about how other people raise their children. I am only speaking from educational standpoint to educate you from a professional background and research premise, as well as my experience with working with a plethora of families, a plethora of children of all stages, ages, special needs, healthy, unhealthy, all of it. And this, it stands to be true that you should just have these crises managed at each stage for the best outcome of how you and your relationship is with that child and how they move into the world and treat other people and treat themselves, which is very important. So I hope that helped and wasn't confusing. If it was confusing, maybe I could do a part 2 clarifying. Again, you can look up Erik Erickson and maybe find a more watered down version, because this was pretty long and I probably used a lot of words. You can probably find a quick synopsis if you Google Erik Erickson Stages of Development, ERIK. And then also you can look up Jean Piaget, who talks about sensory motor intelligence, pre-operational thinking, concrete operational thinking, and formal operational thinking. Those are his 4 stages of development. And essentially they talk about what kids can't do at the beginning, them learning how to do it, and then learning to what, like permanency, and then doing well at it. And he pretty much talks about at stages of development what you can expect your child to do and do well, and what they should not do well at a certain point. Again, just so you can manage your expectations, so you are not being too critical. So I hope this made some sense. If not, listen to it twice, leave a comment, and I will see you on the next one.